The Association of the United States Army is pleased to welcome you to AUSA's Noon Report webinar series. This webinar series features presentations by senior Army leaders responsible for key programs and initiatives. It also features contemporary military authors who weave together the past, present, and future story of the United States Army. Kicking off today's webinar is SMA retired Ken Preston, an AUSA Fellow.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Association of the United States Army's Noon Report. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We appreciate your support as partners in the defense of our nation. Joining us today is Mr. Brandon Cockrell, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Energy and Sustainability. Please take advantage of having Mr. Cockrell here to ask questions. You can use the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen to submit a question. After the discussion, we will take as many questions as possible. You can find the full biography for Mr. Cockrell in the Handouts tab. Mr. Brandon Cockrell currently serves as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Energy and Sustainability. In this role, he is responsible for leading the program development and oversight of installation energy and water security, resilience and conservation, and operational energy. Throughout his career, he has led efforts to deliver hundreds of installation services at the Army's largest training installation at Fort Benning, Georgia, which during his tenure has become one of the Department of Defense's leaders in fielding electric vehicles, increasing energy resilience, and modernization. A native of Anniston, Alabama, Mr. Cockrell holds an industrial and systems engineering degree from Auburn University and a master's in business administration from Columbus State University. Mr. Secretary, sir, thank you very much for joining us here today. And it's an honor. You know, we're just talking about Fort Benning and having the opportunity to, be down at Fort Benning a week ago for the Gainey Cup competition, and really seeing that installation and all that it does for the Army. It's great to have you here, and I just want to say thank you for all you're doing for America's Army.
Oh, thank you. It's truly an honor. The wonderful thing about working for the Army is you get to work around soldiers, and being able to work around soldiers. An old friend of mine once said that a lot of problems that we face is not enough people to know a soldier. And that's something that, has stuck near and dear. And I think that's so true. So it's truly an honor to be able to serve in this role.
That's awesome. As I traveled, and had a chance to see a lot of different things out there, I know that, for our audience out there, and, for them to be able to ask questions about, energy and sustainability, it's going to be very important. So I've got a few questions here just to kind of prime the pump a little bit. And, as we talk about energy, the landscape, as I look back over my career, that landscape is just continually changing. And so can you tell us a little bit about what it means to the Army for energy and sustainability?
Yeah, it was back in October. I was at AUSA, and you're walking around the floor and you're seeing everything. And one of the statements that was made, because you're listening to people the whole time.
Sure.
And we're walking by one of the displays, and I heard an individual say, "Oh, that's just the robotic dogs," and kept walking.
I remember that display.
Yeah. So I'm thinking back, how many the year prior to that, people had gravitated to look at this new technology. A year later, oh, that's just technology. So it's something that's just become normal. So what happens on the energy piece, we're seeing a lot of the same rapid movement in the technologies. And, with the Army's aspect of it is knowing that we have to deliver the energy when it's needed, where it's needed, and at the level that it's needed. And that is such a critical and crucial piece moving forward. And that's kind of our strategy as we're driving through this. With an installation background, you said, and it's true. When I came into the job less than a year ago, kind of had a belief, that every installation should probably have the capability of being an island. After being in this role and seeing, across the whole expanse of the Army, that's changed a bit. because I've got a belief that every installation must be an island, and it must be an island and capable of being an island in a contested environment. And moving forward, that's kind of the mantle that we've placed in our office, is we're driving towards, and we're looking towards those things, is how can we be an island with all the risks that are coming in, with the new technology that's coming in, taking care of soldiers and families and delivering training. So that is, to me, energy becomes the cornerstone of so many things that we are doing across the Army today.
Yeah, that's very good. And you know, you said like as an island, and we always had the analogy that it's also a deployment platform from which to launch and to deploy to other locations when needed. But so what are the Army's priorities, I guess, as I look at it, for securing our energy, for safe and secure energy reliability?
So there's two lenses that everything that we have that we look through, and we look through those two lenses at the future. Lens number one is lethality. So everything that we're doing on the operational energy front and on the installation energy front is through the lens of lethality. Great point about how we're fighting basically from our installations, because we're doing the deployments aspect of that. One of the big things that's changed a lot is, and particularly with the 2018, the actual language that came in the National Defense Strategy that said that that the homeland is no longer a sanctuary. So if the homeland's not a sanctuary, then installations in the homeland aren't a sanctuary. And the reason for that is, we went from 3 to 5 of your actual domains. So air, land, and sea, for years, the Army was able to really address, and installations were deployment platforms. But with the other two, space and cyber, at installations today, we're fighting from our installations, but we're fighting at our installations. We can go down to Fort Eisenhower today, and you can go into some of the areas and you see, we have these cyber warriors today that are preventing, everything from large scale attacks to, an individual from accessing key systems and getting key data and being able to control those systems. So ensuring that we not only can fight from, but we can fight at our installations is paramount today.
So that's really, I hadn't really thought about the cyber piece of it. Yeah. So really every installation out there's, got that kind of a threat that they're fighting every day.
Correct. And that's why the islanding is so important, and it's not to actually close off from the community, because so many of our soldiers are in the communities. Typically 60-70% of the soldiers live in the communities. All the civilians, your contractors, they all live in the community. They're your soccer coaches, they're your Sunday school teachers, they're your individuals that you see all the time. But at the same time, it's having the ability to, if something, there's 4 threats that we really looked at. Any of those 4 threats that hit the area, the installation can be that nexus that they can continue to do the Army's mission and then continue to take care of the family during the entire deployment cycle, or for those other 2 domains that we're fighting at our installations, then being able to provide what's needed when it's needed is critical.
Sure. And you mentioned contractors, and I would think that, with the contractors that, live in and around our military bases, I mean, that's also a source for an enemy to get through them into our installation as well. So I'm sure that's one of those things.
We're constantly watching, putting on an old installation hat. Yep. Your security guards are your first line, and they're doing an amazing job out there every day. Out in the weather, they're taking care of everything. Outstanding. Used to thank them every time you went through the gate. But at the same time, on the cyber piece, it's the partners that we have. A lot of our installations have privatized utilities, and those privatized utilities, when you go into some of their cyber hubs, they are as impressive as you've seen. How some of our partners are the same way. They're defending the power grid systems all the time in the cyber realm. And we see that. We're learning from that as too. Back at the end of last calendar year, we actually did a Hack the Microgrid event. So we'll talk about microgrids, I'm sure, in a little bit, but it was, can we actually gain access?
Yeah.
So we pulled in some hackers and went through this whole process. And it was pretty amazing what we found out through that.
Yeah. So this kind of leads me then to my next question is, how is the Army acquiring reliable energy?
Yeah. So it's, luckily we are using any avenues that we can. We're trying to speed up getting energy and getting it reliable on our installations. So we have a couple of offices. One that's in my area is called the Office of Energy Initiatives. Amazing, stood up in 2014, and its goal is to go basically broker deals across our installations. And what's unique about OEI is they speak not only the Army in installation, they have the ability to speak utility, which is a different language. And then they also have the ability to speak third party or privatized financing, which is again another different language. So they are kind of the Rosetta Stone when it comes to being able to work deals. Since its inception, OEI has brought little over $2 billion into the Army of additional financing and offsets to existing systems. They finished, there's 31 separate projects that have added resiliency to our post. We've had one out in California that can actually completely run off the grid. That was one of their projects. A second one in California, when the wildfires hit, it actually was off the grid for 7 days. They fired up their microgrids, they fired up their self-generation, and they were 7 days off the grid and continued their operations until the power was actually turned back on.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And especially now too. And as a cavalry scout, as a tank master gunner, one of the things that has always been a challenge, particularly for like our infantry soldiers and the cavalry that are going out to set up like an OP is power supply. And you might talk about that just a bit.
Correct. And that's what we're seeing as well, as how do we leverage new technologies in those arenas, and how do we test those new technologies? So one of the lessons that we've learned is a lot of times, when you roll out to the field, you take all available power that you have. And some of the tests that we're seeing is if you place the right type of a battery, instead of the generator powering the TOC or powering the fob, if you place a battery between the generator and the need, we're seeing up to a 50% reduction in generator runtime. So when you're talking with battalion commanders, the people that tested it, they are raving fans, because at night they're able to shut down the generator. They completely are operational off of the battery that's there. They are almost to the point of there's no thermal signature, there's virtually no auditory signature, and they are at full ops.
Wow.
So it is, and at the same time, it reduces the logistics tail because of the amount of fuel that has to be moved in and out. So we're testing these, and we're seeing some promises.
Yeah, and I know for our audience out there, that would be a huge question and a concern about power usage and also too just the signature of the command posts, trying to reduce those and keep them small.
Yeah, so we're continuing to lean forward with our different labs and different partners and seeing how do we, making sure that the energy's there so a soldier in the field or a commander in the field never has to worry where they're going to get power.
Yeah. So on power, so just with that, I mean, we were talking a couple minutes ago, and down at Fort Benning last week, so I had a chance to see and ride in one of the new F-150, Lightning electric vehicles, and so obviously, I mean, the Army's been working on this for a while, and we're continuing to evolve. You might talk about maybe some of the lessons learned.
So when I was the deputy garrison commander at Fort Benning, one of the things we noticed is that at one point several years ago, we were getting over 10% of the EVs that were coming to the Army in 2 years. So knowing that we have to train. So we real quickly had to get ahead of this and put infrastructure in place to make sure that our units can continue to train. Our infantry and our armor, soldiers could continue to go through the process. And, we didn't have to go to the senior commander and say, hey, we have a problem. So what we did as well with that, though, is we employed those vehicles in certain areas to learn. So instead of keeping all of those vehicles internal on the garrison, what we did is we employed a large number in range division. And we would constantly send them out. And if you've been, at Fort Benning, miles and miles and miles of range roads. And we learned things, the difference between a four-wheel drive and an all-wheel drive.
Right.
Drastic differences when you're in the wet South Georgia clay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was talking to them down there too. If you run the air conditioning a lot, when it gets really hot,
Correct.
that has an impact on the batteries.
Yeah, that's what we were learning. Yeah. So it's all right. What are these scoped for, and what are they not scoped for the way that they're currently built?
Right.
And that's, and again, that's where we are looking, installation resilience and energy resilience to me is like, because I can recall back in 2021 or 2022, the Colonial Pipeline was hacked. Well, we were at the point of not being able to get fuel on the installation. So we had already began working plans about how we were going to curtail training because we didn't have fuel.
What year was this?
So it was 21 or 21, I believe
yeah.
it was, when the Colonial Pipeline was hacked into.
Yep.
And luckily, the day that I was going to see the senior commander, we got a call from our AFEs and said, hey, we have fuel. We're now starting to put in. We started getting the training vehicles immediately, your non-tacticals that were worked for training in place. If we had some EVs at that opportunity, there may have been a way that we can build that installation resilience.
Sure.
And using the ones with their, what they're designed for, kind of moving forward is what we're taking.
And Benning being the largest training installation, I mean, there's a lot of support that goes on.
Correct.
For the training mission.
There is, and and it's really targeting a lot of our energy and our efforts on how do we making sure that we train as we fight. And doing everything from, with the Air Force, with Lawson Army Airfield that's there, how do we take in simulate deployments? How does the 75th Ranger Regiment use it? How does so many of the entities leverage this? But training as we fight, and not only building today to train as we fight, but tomorrow. We had a complete re-engineering of the master plan around the airfield because we asked the question, we said, hey, how long will it take to redesign, to get all of these projects that are slated for the airfield? And, the team said about 10 years. I said, good. So in 10 years, we'll be 10 years behind. So it's how do we take and put those lens, the lethality lens and the second lens of the soldier and the family, to look through that and look to the future to say, if it takes us 10 years to build something, how do we build something we'll need in 10 years to 20 years?
Sure.
That way we're getting ahead of the requirements and of the training that's needed.
Yeah, that's a great point, because that really leads into my next question about acquisition pathways and what's the direction that the Army is going to acquire and stay ahead of that lag. And plan for the futures.
So on the installation side, again, we're leveraging Office of Energy Initiatives. We're leveraging third-party financing. So there will be everything that we're seeing is next week there'll be a big announcement that there's going to be an energy third-party financing at one of our industrial bases that we will bring in third-party money and we will modernize a good portion of one of those locations. And we're modernizing, which becomes one of the key tenets that the secretaries ask us to get after. And now we're able to do it with other people's resources because we're able to save energy, and that energy savings gets recouped and put into modernization of those OIBs. So next week, we should have a good announcement coming out. We're excited about it. I thought it may be this week, but it's really exciting to see. So you've got the third-party financing, but the third part is the acquisition strategy that occurs through our utility partners. We have some amazing utility partners that they are leaning forward that, I really enjoy going to an installation and you see sponsorship of an MWR event by one of our utility partners.
Wow.
I mean, it's all right, they get it.
Yeah.
So you've got some amazing partners that are coming online, and they're at the point now that they basically allow us to amortize certain upgrades. But we've got a meeting later this month with an installation using one of their partners and third-party financing to possibly make, or they have a plan, we'll work through it, to have that one installation is completely operational off the grid. And it's a power projection platform off the grid, the electrical grid, because leveraging those three programs.
Yeah, exactly. And we had a talk once, I know years back, about being off the grid, being able to sustain individually, if needed.
Yeah.
But how does third-party financing, how does that work into it?
So what you're able to do is third-party financing allows either your utilities or another entity to come in and look at your facilities, to look at your installation, look at your processes, and they bring upfront money to the table. And the amount of energy that's saved over the duration of that contract is what's used to pay them back. So they bring in the upfront capital, they install the upfront capital, and then the savings that you have. So the first time I was brought this as a deputy, it was, they said, hey, we have one of these in place. We want to do a second. And I'm not from Missouri. So I said, okay, but you got to show me.
Yeah, show me. Yeah.
And we brought a third party in to do the math. And what was interesting is we were right. They weren't saving what they said. They're saving more.
Wow.
So I said, great. Now let's look at the second one.
Yeah.
And now that particular installation, they've got a fence to fence. And we're looking at how do we leverage that? Because it's how we can modernize, how we can constantly get after energy resilience and energy security. We're pursuing hard as well, opening land that's on our installations that are underutilized, of how can we partner that with a data center and an energy generator. And kind of the first gate that I've told our team is we're beginning to have these conversations is, great, the energy grid goes down outside the installation. Step one is that must power the installation. Then we can talk about what other cost offsets.
Sure.
So that's another tool that we're trying to use other people's money to be able to give us, energy resilience, and we pay for it over time.
And this would kind of be like at Fort Irwin, I've seen the large solar
Correct.
Fields that are out there. So just to kind of create that energy.
Yeah, because a lot of times those entities will take that generation and it pumps off the installation. But when the grid goes down, there's switches that pumps onto the installation. So it's all part of resilience, tying it in.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So we're talking real high level stuff now, for the young soldiers out there that are watching this discussion. So how does all this impact, the warfighter, down at the, and their family?
Yeah. Well, I think the key piece, and again, I love being around soldiers, and particularly young soldiers and young families. It's great because I love the energy, but letting them know that we understand that it's not only that we want to make sure they have the energy that they need when they deploy, wherever it may be, that they have it on the battlefield, but when that soldier's deployed, that we have the energy back at the installation to make sure we take care of that family through the entire deployment cycle. Every individual on an installation enables readiness. And while that soldier is deployed, as long as they don't have to even, for a millisecond, think that their family is in any type of risk, that they know their family's taken care of at our installations, that they know the energy's there, then what that does is that allows them to be the most lethal soldier that they can be.
That's awesome. So I think what I want to do is reach out and see what we got. We've got some questions coming in from the audience out there, and I guess the first question here is, as you look at the Army out there, is the Army considering the use of small nuclear reactors at the installation level?
Short answer is yes. The key thing, and the in vogue term now is one called microgrid. So a lot of times things get grouped into the term microgrid. And all a microgrid is two pieces. It's the grid itself that determines where the energy goes. And then the second part of that is the generation source.
Okay.
So if the generation source is anything on the nuclear front, if it's anything on the natural gas, if it's all the way down to, you've got some extremely overzealous hamsters that are running that generator, whatever the source may be, we're looking at whatever is available quickly and economically at an installation to generate. We've had interesting this past 2 weeks, I've had 3 different meetings with individuals talking about hydrogen and what's the possibilities in hydrogen. And we're seeing some, where you take and you drill for oil and natural gas, you can also get hydrogen. And hydrogen is 2.5 times as energy dense as a cubic feet of natural gas. So it's, there's a lot of this new technology that's coming in. So we're really focusing hard on what are the best available generation sources that can set us up for years and years and years. And then the microgrid directs that energy where it needs to go when we need it.
Yeah, so regardless of where the power is coming from, whether it's a nuclear generator or whether it's an off-post electrical supply. So one of the other things that you're responsible for is water security.
Yeah.
And I thought, I might just kind of throw
Yeah.
something out there and talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a piece that, a lot of times we think energy is forgotten. A lot of times when I do, have different speaking engagements, I always ask the question. So how many folks rolled out of the bed this morning and reached over, put their hand on the light switch and did a real quick prayer and said, please let it work today?
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. I've yet to see a hand raise.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with water, because water is expected. Energy is expected. And what happens is all of those, though, are nexused together. Is we're taking and we're building resilience for the soldier to be able to do their mission. The last thing we want is the commander who's in the middle of a mission to have a concern about energy or water. We want that, while it's right now it's expected, we want it to always be expected. And the water aspect of that is critical.
Sure. And we were talking earlier too about, when you think of water security, you think of somebody, intentionally, doing sabotaging the water supply. But it's also, we've seen these storms.
Yes.
Just environmental conditions that possibly could contaminate water supplies.
Yeah. We'd mentioned earlier 4 risks. And the 4 risks that we keep our eye on is the cyber piece. We keep our eye on the natural piece. We keep our eye on the physical piece and the increase in demand piece. So on the piece that we're talking about, the natural disaster, when hurricanes come through, so many times they take, and the debris that becomes in the rivers, which we've experienced, it takes and it shuts down the water intake. So you have to completely eliminate the water intake. You have to clear it out. You have to clean it to be able to build the water pressure back up throughout your system. So having secondary uses, having secondary sources. So we're not only looking at energy resilience projects on post, we're looking at water resilience projects on post. How do you either make it or how do you store it? Because if we're an island, that's the other aspect, is we have to be able to generate it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see what's other questions here. So it says, as you build microgrids, are you asking how the microgrids could be defended from sabotage or weaponized drones?
Yeah, let's take the 2-part question.
Yeah.
Question number 1 is about, your cyber ability to sabotage the systems. And that's why we did the Hack the Microgrid event. We gave this team, I believe it was 12 different modules. We said, can you do these 12? And we gave them a week. We're better than we thought. But we're constantly getting better as we speak on those. So we're constantly trying to get ahead of this, because we know our adversaries are as well. So we're pushing hard, and we're working with the best that we can work with to be able to see, how do we design these? Same thing with our private companies, our utility providers. They're really pushing hard to make sure. Now, the secondary piece is your drone aspect. That is that's something all of our installations are working. You see the executive order that came, several of those that have came out, and they reference back to, to the Golden Dome. And there's installations that, putting my deputy garrison hat on, there's installations that are actively pursuing a lot of those. I've actually seen one at an installation that they flight tracks multiple things, and they actually have some deployable, almost like brick drones that go after if needed. But keeping an eye on those, or designing them to where they are defendable, or to where a drone can't go in and sabotage those for a physical attack, is all on the table that we're looking at too. And it's not only us, but our utility providers, because you remember back in 23, there was a gentleman down in North Carolina that took a high-powered rifle and did physical attack towards one of our, one of the gen sets that's outside, and transmission sets outside of an installation.
Yes.
So he's, that's the physical piece that we're working the design aspects around too.
Yeah, and see, and for me, with your background, being tied in, working at the garrison level, I think that you understand the relationships that have to be built between the installation and, of course, not just the power generation sources outside the base, but also the community security and
absolutely,
and the intel processes as well.
It is, because it's, any of those 4 risks that we talk about, none of those either go to the installation boundary and throw their hands up and say we're done. It affects, it's a regional piece. So it's constantly working with the relationships with your communities. It's planning with your communities. You know, our a friend of mine says that, you know, you never want to get to an incident site and exchange a business card. You want to have those relationships ahead of time.
Yes.
You want to have those plans laid out ahead of time, how things can happen. So at Fort Benning, we did a Black Start exercise. We had our community there. You know, Black Start exercises are where we shut the grid off and we see how the on-site generation works. And we do it up to 8 hours. We successfully went through ours, and actually during the AAR, we found out we did a CONUS redeployment, and the airfield was on completely 100% backup power and didn't miss a beat.
That's awesome.
And that to me is a success. And we're seeing that. We've done Black Start exercises at 20 installations. We're doing 5 to 7 a year, and it is a full rundown of how well is this installation prepared.
Yeah, that's great, and absolutely, because, you know, otherwise, and, you know, with the Army, I mean, those in uniform, it's a revolving door, so you constantly have new people coming in, and I think to exercise those systems, it's really a learning experience for everybody.
It's constant, and that's the benefit is, you know, you've got individuals that have been there for generations. It's almost, you know, the old DPW guy that understands how it works.
Right.
But it's also taking and putting those systems in place, modernizing where we can. You know, we have installations that have utility control systems. They can control most of their post at a computer terminal. And it's all through a segregated network and how they protect it all. And we're seeing incredible cost savings. One of our installations has one of those, the microgrid, and has the generator they can centrally control. And when real-time pricing of our energy gets to a certain level, they turn on this natural gas generator. So last year, they saved almost $2 million in money of pure hardcore taxpayer dollars.
Wow.
By using a natural gas generator on that microgrid instead of buying it off the
Yeah,
grid.
that's awesome. That's great.
So it's exciting to see where we're going with it.
Yeah. Let's see what other questions we have here. So another question that's come in is how many utility partners and agreements are there altogether presently?
We are well over 50, approaching 60 across the board, and we're constantly looking at where are some others. You know, and there's times that we have some systems that they're ready to be turned over to our utilities. We've got some to partners and partner with those and privatize them. We've got some that, you know, we're continuing to work on to get them up to more modern levels, and they're not good candidates yet to turn over. But we have great partnering meeting. Matter of fact, I'm meeting with one of our utility providers this afternoon. But having those conversations and learning what they're doing, where are they going, how are they building resilience? You know, one of the other risks that we focus on is they say by the end of 2030 there will be a 20% increase in energy demand. Okay, so watching how that is, if you're an installation, you know, if you're a co-op, or if you're a company that has 5 generators, you don't have to build a 6th in 4 years. So it's, you know, you've got some pretty hefty things. And the way that they do that is, you know, you have to either get your loans, you have to increase rates and all, but it's really working real close with our UP providers. And particularly if we're looking at, you know, AI data centers with generation capabilities and what's required at that installation to be able to do those things, what's your water sources, what's your natural gas sources, or whatever may be, it's pulling all of those to the table together. And what we've learned is when you build those partnerships, I mean, they're all good Americans. They're going to come to the table as well and say, how can we help?
Sure.
And that's what's enjoyable to see.
Yes. So looking out here, we've got another question that's come in is, in addition to a sense of reassurance for themselves and their families, what improvements or tangible impacts will soldiers experience on the day-to-day from upcoming energy and sustainability developments?
All right, so it's making sure that the energy and making sure that this is, you know, that all of that's available is the critical piece. There are so many new technologies. I know that the Installation Management Command is working through, you know, the Digital Garrison app that's being tied in, and it's taking all of those pieces together because it's making sure that when a soldier leaves one installation and they go to the next installation, that they carry their data comes with them. I mean, we've all filled out the form that says do not copy, but it was copied in like 1983 and it's still crooked on the paper. You know, so it's how we're getting after the digitization of all of these things. So those are some of the tangible things. It's just making it smoother to go back and forth. I mean, you see some of the school systems that are on installations now, how they have embraced a lot of your next gen type learning. I mean, you can walk through them in the old classrooms with the metal desk with the wooden they're gone. Yeah, those are gone. You go through these now and you got these pods that are working through, and it's really interesting to see how these institutions are leaning forward and realizing what's next into the future. So it's exciting to see. And there's a lot of initiatives about how you modernize an installation and how do you modernize that installation without a massive bill to the taxpayer. And that's where, your peak shaving of those natural gas generators is through finding other third-party financing opportunities. Those are some of the big ways that we're trying to really modernize what we can. Sure. So it's exciting to see.
Another question that's come in is a question about wind energy, and so how are we? What's the Army doing for wind energy on our installations?
Yeah, there's certain areas geographically that it works, and there's a lot that it doesn't that we've seen in the private industry. So what we're focusing so much now on is how do we do it fast? How do we do it economical? And how do we do it to where it meets the need? Now, I mean, we met with some folks this week and they asked me, they said, what's one of your biggest concerns? And my initial response was, it's a 5-letter word. It's called speed. We have to get things done, and we have to get things done in direct relation. A lot of the executive orders that are out now have really opened apertures, and they've allowed installations to really pursue some of the things that they're already naturally there on those installations. The hydrogen concept.
Yes.
There is one discussion that's going on now of an installation that may be completely powered in the future if this technology catches and goes the direction it looks like it is. But it's on the wind aspect of it itself, there is a lot of other dynamics of how does it interfere with training areas.
Sure.
So we monitor all of that. Projects off installations come to us for review, energy projects that aren't ours, but we get a vote because they may affect training. Yeah. So we are pushing real hard on what's the most economical. How do we get into and we focus in on the direction that the president and the secretaries have told us to drive towards? Right now, we don't have any of those projects because we're focusing so much on the other. Now, are there projects that our utility providers that are building or they're doing? They may be doing that. But on our piece, we're focusing real hard on economics, fast, get the grids in place, because as we're working against our near peer competitors. So if we are better than our competitors in certain areas, we have to match their pace to stay ahead of them. If we're at that level, we have to increase our pace to get ahead of them. But if we're behind them, we really have to double time. We have got to pick up in certain areas as we're driving forward. So it's finding those niches and really pushing the whole development of technology and getting it on the ground and getting this resilience in place for our soldiers is key.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the grid, and I know like many of our installations, had a lot of overhead power lines, and I know there's been a lot of transition going to putting a lot of stuff underground to protect them. I mean, you might talk on that.
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly, anytime that there's a project that comes through at your installation, you always have got to look at it again through the resilience piece. It's how are we taking and modernizing either the additional power lines? Are they underground? Are they above ground? Where? Because it may be astronomically more expensive to put it underground because of you're dealing with whatever the substructures are. If you're dealing with rocks, some of our installations are built on rocks, and you go to them and you're like, but they're beautiful installations. But it becomes the part of what works best at that installation. And it's really extremely tailorable. Moving forward is kind of where we're really focusing on it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what else. We got another question here that's come in is, what is the plan for the M&S tail of these microgrids you are installing at Anniston, Benning, Rucker, Hood, Bragg? The equipment needs an M&S tail, and yet there has been no discussion about maintaining this highly technical equipment?
Okay. So a lot, and again, it's a great question.
Yeah.
These are things that we talk.
Yeah.
See, a lot of the microgrids that are put in place, we have 32 microgrids operational today. And we have 67 microgrids that are in planning or under construction. And most of those are by our utility providers. So that boils down to that particular question is working on, they are responsible for providing the resilience against that microgrid system and keeping the tech up. Those that are on our side, that becomes, part of the Director of Public Works requirement and responsibility to take and drive that forward. If they'll have the skill set in-house, or there's abilities to go out and partner with other programs, like intergovernmental support agreements, to be able to provide that expertise at the table when needed.
So how does that work where, if you've got, a source that's off the installation and, for whatever reason, the technology is not there, it's kind of fallen behind. I mean, do you compensate for that on the installation, or how does that relationship work?
Yeah, so we're trying to pull everything on the installation, not only just, the generation and the microgrid piece, but, we have some installations that have one power line. And
one power line coming on?
One power line coming in, one feed. Ideally we want minimum two, and we're working that, and we're working the power sources.
Yeah.
But it's the technologies that they have of providing that power. That becomes, how secure are confident are we that we can rely on that? And our UP providers, which manage, our grid, but also the power generation capabilities, either through our co-ops or through your large energy providers. That's what, we buy the electrons from them. So we are constantly working as well. If we have a concern, then that's who we work with and see what is their plan. How do they plan on upgrading? And then what we do is, knowing that it's difficult to power a whole post. So what we do is we have these documents called installation energy and water plans, to where the senior commander says, for me to do my mission on this installation, it requires these 200 buildings. Okay, so you can go off the grid, still do your mission with these 200 buildings. And the senior commander signs their name and says, yeah, I concur, this is my list. Well, then the public works director says, okay, what is our generation capability? What is our storage capability? How do we make sure that building, whether it's a comms hut, whether it's everything from the police station to your IOC on post, is how do we make sure that has energy? And that plan goes through and it drives us in that direction. Now, we have a statute that drives us in that direction. It says that 100% of those buildings will be at a minimum 99.99% of the year powered. And that's minimum. It goes up to 4 nines. So by 2030. So we are really getting granular level of detail now with what's the buildings, your IWIPs, those plans have it all laid out. Yep. What are the energy requirements? Are they there? And if they are, then that lets us focus on other locations that need either some policy adjustment or some, how do we take and adjust some resourcing if we can.
That's fascinating that it's tracked down to that level. Yeah. Where, 99.9% of the time that this particular building.
I remember when I read that, it was, and we have to report to Congress on this. So one of the things I said, well, how far is that? So it's everywhere from a little over 8 hours, almost 8 hours, to 35 seconds in a year. So we better have some good energy that can be generated. And that's why so many of our buildings have generator sets that are already there. And it's how we take in, we leverage and utilize, and then how do we scale those?
That's amazing. Another question here that's come in is, are these exclusive utility agreements for each installation, or can there be more than one utility partner per installation? So we have an exclusive agreement by commodity. So the person that does the natural gas is not the same person that does, your water and electric. Yeah. So all of those. So we have some installations that everything's privatized. We have some that only certain systems are privatized. So, and again, it's everything from who is the niche provider in that area. If you have Dominion Energy, they're an energy company. So it's making they don't venture into the other parts. So it's how we take and do that. So we don't do
particular contract with one entity and they sub it all out. It becomes based off of that particular skill set because we want the best. We don't want someone that just has an idea of how to do something. We want the people that are the best to be able to work on our installations and provide what our soldiers and families need.
So if there's like two power companies that are off the installation, is it sold to one of those power companies to supply the installation, or is it shared between two? Or
it would end up being one.
It'd be one.
Yeah, and it would go through the entire procurement process that requires. And it also is dependent on state, because one thing I've learned being here is with 50 states, there's 50 laws. So it's all in how that is laid out. So it's pretty interesting to go, okay, let's call our attorney and let's see how we drive forward in those certain areas.
What about like cable internet providers?
And those are, you've got your MWR works some of those, your AFES work some of those as well. Yeah. And it's just different agreements at the installations, and particularly how do we upgrade? And there's some that are leaning forward, particularly like in barracks. Some good conversations. We did a Barracks of the Future initiative and and we sat down with, I just had one simple question was, great, you've designed it. Have you asked the soldier? And we got a blank look, said, okay, keep what you have, go grab us about 30 soldiers that are going to live in it. And we let the soldiers pick out what's the tile patterns? Here's 5 choices. What are the colors? What are all of these things? And we even had, what are the wall wraps? What are the quotes of our senior leaders throughout generations? How do we take and inspire our soldiers as they're living in barracks with these new tech? Not only new tech, because they gave us all kinds of stuff, but they wanted like 100 meg per room because of gaming systems and phone systems and streaming services. But we took and parlayed that as well with how do we take and make this barrack really impressive for the next generation that's coming in.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as we wind down here in time, I just want to make sure that is there anything that we didn't get a chance to talk about that that you might think that our audience out there would be very interested to hear?
Well, I think the key thing is knowing that we're pushing hard and we're pushing fast, and I think that is so critical moving forward. If everything we do is going to be through the lens of a soldier, one of the things we ask in my office daily is someone gets a random question. They get, okay, what'd you do today for a soldier? Yep. And that's a question that I think every single person's got to answer. What'd you do today for a soldier? And if you can't answer that question, either walking out of the building, on the way home, if you're at an installation and all you do is type in a spreadsheet, every single thing that we do ties back to a soldier. And we're pushing hard with that. And, you can ask any of my team, they'll get the question. But it's fun to really see. And what happens is it builds up a sense of pride that we're here to serve those that serve. And it's really impressive, and it's an honor to do it.
That's awesome. So I just want to say thank you, Mr. Secretary, for all that you do, and what you do for our soldiers, their families, our veterans that are out there now that I are one. So I just want to say thanks. It's it's really refreshing to know that the work and effort that you're doing out there is really taking care of the Army. And I think that with your background and all your experience, you're the right person in the right place at this time, to support America's Army.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So before we part, I want to inform our viewers of a few upcoming events that we've got planned. First is the LAMPAC Symposium. Will be the 13th to the 15th of May in Honolulu, Hawaii. Great place to visit. AUSA will also host a noon report featuring Command Sergeant Major Gregory O. Betty, the 15th Command Sergeant Major of the United States Army Reserve, on the 29th of May. We will host a noon report featuring Lieutenant General Brian Eifler, Deputy Chief of Staff G1, on the 18th of June. And AUSA's inaugural Land Euro Symposium will be the 16th to the 17th of July in Wiesbaden, Germany. I hope you can join us for an upcoming webinar or event. For more information about any of these events or to register, please visit our website at ausa.org. Finally, we thank all of you who support us with your membership. Membership matters. You help us support our Army. Thank you again for attending, and have a great, great Army Day.